With the Sena finally catching up to the Cardo Packtalk with their Sena 50R and 50S, we've decided to actually test out the differences between the two systems. We'll mainly be taking a look at the greatest change between the two, their speakers, their quality, and their battery life. Sebastian from Champion Helmets here, and we've already run over the specs between the two systems in a previous video, and we've heard your comments and suggestions, so we'll be getting into the nitty-gritty of the 50R and the Cardo Packtalk Slim. So we'll be leaving out most of the specs here to focus on the actual test of the speakers, their build quality, their audio quality, as well as the battery. So with a recommended retail price of about 330 euros or $370 US, we have the 50R versus the Cardo Packtalk Slim, which is coming at 340 euros or $380 US. So let's see how they stack up. Just a quick reminder before we get testing to subscribe and check out the rest of our YouTube channel, where we also take out the latest helmets on the road, measure their performance, and bring you the data. For our speech test, we wanted to check the reproduction quality that you're getting from the Sena and the Cardo in terms of the speakers, since you want to be able to hear what your buddies are actually saying to you as you ride, or if someone gives you a phone call. So for our setup, we've paired a phone to each system and started a call. We kept the systems at their top volume and the volume of the device constant to get a consistent result across both. We read our test phrases from another room to avoid the test microphone picking up any extra noise, and we've read from the standard test phrases list, number 15, which was developed by Harvard for testing microphones. We then recorded the playback from the speakers in both helmets. First, here's the Cardo Packtalk.
The young kid jumps the rusty gate. Guess the results from the first scores. A salt pickle tastes fine with ham.
Now here's the Sena 50R.
The young kid jumped the rusty gate. Guess the results from the first scores. A salt pickle tastes fine with ham.
Lastly, here's how the phrases sound on our test microphone for your own reference. The young kid jumped the rusty gate. Guess the results from the first scores. A salt pickle tastes fine with ham. As far as the speech reproduction of the two systems, it's about the same. Things definitely will sound better in person because we're dealing with additional microphones here, but both reproduce the phrases reasonably well. Now onto the speaker volume. Since one of the main changes to the 50R are the new upgraded HD speakers, this has also led to many questions over how well it stacks up to the Cardo's JBL speakers, especially since JBL is already such a well-respected speaker company, and when riding at speed, it can sometimes be hard to actually hear the system. So has Sena finally cracked it? To find out, we ran several tests. First, we'll do our volume test by putting the system in a helmet with our 360 head, and we turned up the volume with a decibel meter placed right next to the speaker in the same location as when we do our road tests, so the same spot as if someone was actually listening. We then tested the volume using a single tone to try and get a consistent reading. First, here's the Cardo Packtalk. Now here's the Sena 50R. So when testing the Cardo Packtalk, we got a reading of about 96 decibels, which is a decent result that is all thanks to those JBL speakers in the helmet. Looking at the Sena 50R's HD speakers now, they managed to put out an impressive 93 decibels, which, as you can hear, is already very loud. So in this case, Sena have the smaller speaker that is almost as loud as the Cardo, but how well does it do for playing music? Which brings us to our next test, where to get a full picture of the speaker's ability to reproduce a range of frequencies, we ran a frequency response test. During this test, we slightly changed our setup with our decibel meter and the speakers both placed outside the helmet. We placed the decibel meter microphone facing a single speaker 2 centimeters away to replicate what you would hear if you were actually wearing the helmet, with one speaker in each ear. For our test, we used pink noise to see how the speakers perform across all frequencies, and though pink noise has an equal energy per octave, this is a closer approximation to how the ear perceives sound than if we used white noise. For these graphs, we have the peak as the line on top, which in this case is the target, and we have the input response underneath. The closer the two lines are and the flatter they are, the better, and as far as the various frequency ranges go, the average human ear picks up frequencies from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Now we first have the Cardo Packtalk Slim pink noise test. Now we've got our Sena 50R pink noise test. Looking at the Sena 50R first, the line is overall fairly stable from the upper bass all the way into the mid-range. There are small but sudden peaks just at the end of the upper bass, which may mean that it will come on a little strong. The 50R does quite well heading into the treble range, but according to the graph, this does have the side effect that the upper ranges are going to be a bit more pronounced. The Packtalk Slim, in contrast, has a smoother line as it travels through the different frequency ranges. Not only does it come in closer to the line in the treble range, but the overall trend is smoother. Nonetheless, it's best to keep in mind that these are, at the end of the day, speakers designed with a size restriction, so they won't be quite on the same level as something like a €500 home setup. Lastly, for the speaker fidelity, we kept the same setup as the volume test, but instead of playing a tone, since we like to stay classy here at Champion Helmets, we played our favorite 360 tune so you could get an idea of how the two sounded. Of course, this is a more subjective test, but we recorded it for you so you can hear it. We used this song to test the speaker's dynamic range, going from soft to loud, as well as the sound reproduction for the bass, middle, and treble, and we did this test off the same phone to make sure that we were getting the same quality of the connection, and we kept our decibel meter handy when we recorded the playback for you as well. Again, this, as far as fidelity goes, this is a lot more subjective, but there are still some conclusions that we can draw here. But first, for a good idea of the dynamic range and the fidelity, we'll play back the main test segment from the beginning of the song. First, we've got the Cardo Packtalk. Now, here's the same segment from the Sena 50R. Obviously, since we recorded this with microphones, the speakers of both will sound much better in person, and you likely won't be listening at maximum volume, but you can still get a general idea of the two. And it's important to note, when not at maximum volume, the Sena 50R does sound very nice. The main difference here is that though the 50R came out much louder again, the Cardo came out with a crisper sound. Lastly, we come to the battery life and recharge time of the Sena 50R and the Cardo. On the surface, both advertise about 13 hours of battery, though the Sena also adds the caveat that you only get 8 hours on mesh. But we've decided to put this to the test too by playing the radio until they both die, to approximate a full day of riding and listening. We then charge them back up again to also check out how long it would take before you can head out on the road again. Before we play the test, a word of warning that we sped everything up, so beware that the system's lights are going to be flashing rapidly alongside the rapidly moving timer. We performed the battery life test on full volume after both systems were finished fully charging. Overall, we got good results from both systems. We started them off with the radio in the morning and left them both to run throughout the day. You can see our timer for the battery along the bottom of the screen here, and you can see the state of the system's battery in the flashing lights. Since it's good to know how much time you have before your battery dies completely, we also kept track of how long it was before the system gave a low battery light warning and when they actually died. For the Cardo, the first low battery light came on 9 hours and 24 minutes in, but the Slim Packtalk powered on through for another hour and a half until it died 10 hours and 57 minutes in, which is still fairly close to the advertised talk time of about 13 hours. The Sena 50R, in contrast, first gave a warning signal 12 hours and 53 minutes into the test, but it was only 8 minutes and 15 seconds later that the Sena 50R died. Time of death, 13 hours and 1 minute into the test, so right on the money for the system's advertised 13-hour talk time. Good results overall, but be warned with the Sena, once you get your low battery warning, you won't get as much time to respond as with the Cardo. Finally, we have our test where we let the systems charge and timed how long it took for each to reach their full battery again. We used the same model charger with an output of 5 volts at 1 amp to ensure a fair recharge rate of each system. You can see our timer for the battery along the bottom of the screen here, and you can see the state of the system's battery in the lights. And on recharging, we were definitely surprised with the 50R's battery, which lived up to the hype and really did charge in an hour. Though the time we recorded was 1 hour and 53 seconds, this is still a pleasant surprise. The Cardo also performed well, recharging in 2 hours and 50 minutes, which, considering it's not designed for quick charge, is also a great result. Before our final results, there was one small thing related to how the two systems stack up. First and foremost is the fact that the Cardo is IP67 waterproof certified, while the Sena stays suspiciously silent on the matter, which suggests that it is at most only weatherproof or water resistant, which is definitely not the same as waterproof. Another thing to note is that both will let you bridge people into the mesh, which is a good feature. So, to sum up, both systems do well in different places. For speech fidelity, both systems do about the same, which is not surprising, which gives them 3 stars each. For the audio fidelity, the Cardo with its JBL speakers came out excellent, earning 5 stars, while the Sena 50R was strong and earned 4. But if you have a loud bike or constantly find yourself turning up the volume, then both the Cardo Packtalk and the Sena 50R are for you, with the Sena's 92 decibels of volume and the Cardo's 96, which means that the Cardo earns 5 stars, while the Sena earns 4. For battery, if you plan to push the limits, then the 50R would be a strong contender with its long battery life of 13 hours, which earns 5 stars, while the Cardo was slightly weaker at 10 hours and 53 minutes, which earns the system 3.5 stars. Though the Cardo had a shorter life, it gave you a warning much further in advance. For recharging as well, the Sena comes out on top with 1 hour to a full recharge, earning it 5 stars, and the Cardo again earns 3.5 for its 2 hours and 53-minute charge time. For weatherproofing, the Cardo earns 5 stars for being fully IP67 certified, while the 50R earns 3 stars for being weatherproof. For connectivity, both systems also do well with 4.5 stars for the Cardo with its 15-rider DMC mesh and bridging ability, and 5 stars for the 50R with its 24-rider mesh and bridging function. Lastly, for the range, the Packtalk earns 3.5 stars for its 1.2 kilometer range, though this is boosted when in mesh, while the 50R earns 5 stars for its 2 kilometer range. This brings the Cardo Packtalk Slim and Bold to a total of 4 stars at 10 euros per star, while the Sena 50R comes out with a total of also 4 stars at another 10 euros per star, which brings the two systems to a tie. If you'd like to see more on either the Sena 50 series or the Cardo Packtalk, then don't forget to check out our site at championhelmets.com, where we have our lowest price guarantee, and you can also find these systems at a discount in our various helmet bundle deals. So that's all for the Sena 50R versus the Cardo Packtalk Slim. We're mainly seeing a lot of catch-up on the part of Sena with the added benefit of more time and newer technology, but the battery life was still excellent, as was the recharge time, and the speakers are decent as well. The Cardo still stays strong after all these years, especially in terms of its design and its excellent speakers. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe and let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm Sebastian from Champion Helmets, and thanks for watching.